Laurie Love. With a name like Laurie Love, I told you were meant to be a sexpert or a love guru. Mm-hmm. What do you call yourself?
It was meant to be an erotic blueprint coach.
Yes. Okay. Tell me about Erotic Blueprint and the work that you do.
Yeah. So there's 5 erotic blueprint types, and they were discovered by my mentor, Jaya. Mm-hmm. She gets all the credit. I absolutely love and adore her. She is a world-renowned sexologist and sexpert and sexological body worker, and has written many books. And so when my partner and I started working with her, I can't believe it's been 15 years now. When we started working with her, she hadn't even discovered the erotic blueprints yet. Mm-hmm. And we worked with her for a few years because we were just completely mismatched. I had one foot out the door and was ready to leave him, mm-hmm. and was completely sexually unsatisfied. And then along came Jaya, and then along came the erotic blueprints.
Changed your life.
Completely changed my life, completely changed our relationship. So there's 5 erotic blueprint types, and those are the energetic type. And those are people who really love lots of space. Like, they don't even need to be touched in order to feel pleasure. Mm-hmm. And actually space and anticipation actually increases their pleasure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then there's the sensual blueprint. And the sensual is all about the 5 senses. So they just delight in, sight, sound, taste, touch, mm-hmm. smell. Like every moment can be filled with pleasure, based on what they see and what's around them and what they experience. Mm-hmm. Then there's the kinky blueprint, and that's all about what is taboo to you. It's a very specific, like, what is your taboo? What is your naughty? Mm-hmm. We think of it in a whole spectrum, and yes, it can be that. It can include it. But in the erotic blueprint world, it's really, what is your taboo? So, for instance, for me, when I was growing up, premarital sex, mm-hmm. right? Not supposed to have sex before you get married. Mm-hmm. So taboo. Then there's the sexual blueprint, and that's what we think of when we think of sex. That's the nudity, the nakedness. That's what you see in porn. That's mm-hmm. penetration. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the blueprints. There's 5, mm-hmm. remember?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then there's shapeshifter, and shapeshifter loves it all and wants more of it. Okay. So these are the people who have been told, like, oh, you're insatiable. Oh, you're too much. Oh my gosh, you're so complicated. Mm-hmm. So as we discover who we are as erotic beings with these 5 erotic blueprint types, it can then give you so much information to work with mm-hmm. about who you are and what you need.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do when there's a mismatch?
And I'm so glad you asked that, because that's exactly what happened in my relationship. Mm-hmm. So when I took the erotic blueprint quiz, because it's a free quiz online, or you can take an in-depth quiz, I found out that I'm highly energetic, I'm highly sensual, and I have a psychological kinky side. I have a naughty side. Sexual was my lowest blueprint. My partner took the quiz, and guess what? Sexual was his highest blueprint. Okay. Then sensual. Kinky and energetic were his lowest. Okay. So complete opposite. Mismatch. Complete mismatch, right? Okay. And we had been having sex in the sexual blueprint for our entire relationship, mm-hmm. because mm-hmm. I didn't know about these blueprints. Yeah. I didn't know that I was energetic. I didn't know that I was a sensual. Mm-hmm. And I definitely wasn't expressing myself mm-hmm. as an energetic or as a sensual. And so once I learned, about the things that fed me as an energetic, like that space that I was talking about, that I would get short-circuited when I was touched too fast or too soon. Okay. And that was like a huge turning point, because mm-hmm. the sexual blueprints, like, want to go for the genitals, want to touch your body, want it to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Orgasm's the end goal. It's all about penetration, and the energetics, like, whoa, let's back up and take some time here, and let's actually give it some space, mm-hmm. and let's, like, not touch each other, and let's explore that and see where that goes. And so what we did was we found a place to meet. We did a few things. First thing we did was we found a place to meet. And since I was really high in sensual and his second was sensual, we met in the sensual.
Okay.
We found a common ground.
Okay. Yeah.
We talked about, okay, what are the things that are really important to you when it comes to sensuality? We both really love food, good quality food, really nice presentation, love going to fancy restaurants, ambiance is really important. Music. We love music. Certain music, makes us feel a different way, right? And there's all different kinds and types and genres of music, which each blueprint, an energetic would like maybe some like lighter yoga, chimes and more ethereal, kind of music. Sensual's really like the really gets you in your body and moving and swaying, and then like kinky music could be like it has that edge and uses some of those naughty words, and then the sexual music is just all about like got all the words in it and it's all about, yeah. Yep. All about it, right? Yeah. They say sex multiple times in the song.
Yeah.
And Shapeshifter, loves like a whole combination. And it can change at different times. Or a song that ebbs and flows and changes and, like keeps you guessing. And so we really met on the sensual level and we realized like, and each blueprint really loves different kinds of touch as well. So the energetic loves hovering hands because it gives it that space, right? The sensual really loves contouring touch because it feels just really soothing and grounding and safe and like really gets you in your body. Like a really nice massage just feels so amazing, right? So we started playing with sensual touch and energetic touch so that my body and that my nervous system could calm down, settle down, feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, before moving into another blueprint or before going to the sexual blueprint. Because what I found was that I was overriding myself. Yeah. Things were happening too fast, too soon. Like I've been hearing some statistics lately that, women's arousal level is like 25 to 45 minutes. That's just to get aroused. That's just for the body, our bodies to be able to relax and open up. And some women are ready to go. Like the sexual blueprint is ready to go, 0 to 60, no problem. And yes, there are women who are like that, most definitely. But most women sort of fit into like the energetic and sensual blueprints. And so, keeping that in mind, like that has been really, really huge for me is giving myself that time because I would override my boundaries. I'd be like, oh, I want it, or I want to, or that sounds like fun, or I want to get to the end result, and it was like, my body was so not ready for it. And so no wonder I was frustrated. No wonder I wasn't having a positive experience. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't as, I was like,
you weren't satisfied though,
I'm like,
or
what
fulfilled.
are all these orgasms that people are talking about? Why am I not having ones like that, you know? And like when we see porn, it's like, we don't see any of the foreplay, right? Or we only see like, I heard a statistics that like people only want to see 7 minutes, right? And so it gets to penetration really quickly, but it's like, okay, there was a whole lead up time to get to that point, to be able to like shoot that part of it. And we don't see that. It's not demonstrated. It's not modeled for us.
So you started with a commonality between you and your partner. How do you then honor each one of your blueprints? Because they are opposites. So do you switch off in terms of like which one you're honoring, or how do you approach that?
So we always approach it with like what is comfortable. Like we go at the pace. We only go as fast as the slowest part of us. In whichever blueprint, or as fast as the slowest person. So that way, nobody's boundaries are being crossed. Nobody's being overwritten. There's also a level of understanding each other's blueprints so that you can have compassion. Because one of the reasons, when when we get frustrated, we want to blame the other person, right? It's their fault, right? And I found that I was doing that a lot. Oh, you always want it this way and you don't know what I need and you don't give me what I want. That was a huge sensual shadow that I had. And we'll go into some superpowers and shadows in a little bit because I love talking about that.
Okay.
And so what I had to come back to was like, what are the superpowers of the sexual blueprint, and appreciating my partner and seeing him for who he is and celebrating him in that.
Okay.
So him understanding me as an energetic and as a sensual, and me really understanding him as a sexual.
So for people that aren't used to talking through these things, how do you get both partners to the table and bring these things up? Because it is taboo for a lot of people who grew up maybe being told, as you said, that premarital sex is bad. So they have in their minds that I can't talk about these things, and then they're left sexually unsatisfied. So how do you get both partners to open up and share their true desires or their true love language or their true blueprint?
I would say that the first thing that you do is just have a conversation, like set an intention. Hey, I really would like to talk to you about this, and just get it out there. There's a whole, load of questions like, what are some of the desires that you have? Taking the erotic blueprint quiz is actually like the best way to open up the conversation.
Gotcha.
Because from taking the quiz and seeing what your percentages are, and the quiz comes with a whole report on your primary erotic blueprint, and then also talks about the states and stages of sexuality, the obstacles and pathways to sexual health and pleasure, and also the if you're a sensual blueprint, how do you play with the energetic? How do you play with the kinky? So how do you play in each of the blueprints?
Okay.
So having this report is a really good conversation starter. Hey, what's your erotic blueprint? Do you know what your primary erotic blueprint is? What are your percentages? Dating profiles. I would love to see this as a category on a dating profile. I am an energetic, sensual with psychological kink, looking for a, kinky sexual with lots of energetic superpowers. You're like, how cool would that be, right? To be able to just openly, say who you are and ask for what it is that you want. So the report is fantastic. And there's lots of questions in there, asking, saying, hey, I know this might be a little bit a taboo for us. Are you open? Are you willing to try it? Really stepping into the conversation and saying, I really want to talk about this. This is really important to me.
Yeah.
And there's a really nice, there's a kind and gentle way to do it. And the blueprints are like the perfect way. And so instead of being like, because what I did was, I'm sexually unsatisfied and I'm about to break up with you. Instead of going, hey, you know what? I realized that we have different blueprints, and it would feel really great to me if we could play in these other areas. And so, with the erotic blueprints, there's also an Erotic Blueprint Breakthrough Program, and it's a self-study course that my mentor Jaya and her partner Ian recorded a number of years ago. And I call it the sex education we never had, because it teaches communication skills. It teaches all about the blueprints. It talks about, what happens when you're a mismatch. It goes through speaking the blueprints. And so by learning the vocabulary of each blueprint, you can then start speaking your partner's blueprint. They can start speaking yours, and you can expand into speaking other blueprints, that are not your own. So, me expanding into what I really needed to do was with my partner, the biggest things were I needed to get into my sensual, because I was in a very masculine world. I did not dress like this. I did not look like this. I didn't make myself up. I was like boring pants, t-shirts. I love jeans and t-shirts. It is very hot and sexy, yes. But, You know, like when you're in that really masculine energy, there's a difference when you put on a dress and you put on heels
For sure.
and you put on jewelry versus, you know, you're sitting around in your pajamas. Like making an effort to be more sensual and to, you know, take care of myself and to show up in that way. Like it feeds me. And so by feeding ourselves, we can then like give from the overflow instead of like people pleasing. Oh, I'm just doing this because you're my partner and I feel like I have to. It's more like, okay, I'm full and here's what I want to share and here's what I'd like to receive from you. Instead of like coming to your partner starving
Yeah. Yeah.
and expecting them to feed you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I'd assume most people just don't know where to start. And it sounds like the sexual blueprint is the way to start. People,
Yes.
I don't think, know what questions to ask or how to bring that conversation to the table. So I think that's a great starting point. It just kind of does all the work for you. You don't have to think about the questions. It's already worked in.
The erotic blueprints take the guesswork out of sex.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable because you learn how to speak each one of the blueprints and you learn, you know, the touch that each of the blueprints like, you know, likes and enjoys. And then from there, it's like you've learned a new language and now you can communicate on a different level.
What do you find in the couples that you work with? What do you find to be the biggest obstacles? I'd assume communication is a huge one, but
yes. And
what else do you see?
And also boundaries.
Okay. Yeah.
Energetics are a huge part of that because like we're having a lot more consent conversations these days, but we didn't.
Yeah.
40, 50, 60 years ago. I mean, even 10 years ago, right? Like it's an evolving thing. And so what I find is that a lot of people don't know what their boundaries are. They don't know that they are allowed to have boundaries. You know, one of the biggest things like that I was raised with was like, it's your wifely duty, right?
Yep.
And like, that's a huge...
Yeah, there's no empowerment in that. There's you're not allowed to have boundaries in that model. Yeah.
None whatsoever. And so like when that's what you've been told and that's your role, you know.
Sex is a chore.
Yeah. And it's not fun. There's no play involved. You know, and so healing our mindsets from that. So I'd say unlearning all the stuff that we were taught or not taught or taught through not being taught.
Yeah.
You know, assuming things and picking up on other people's stuff. So really healing those shadows, shedding those layers and really looking at like, who do I want to be as an erotic being? Like that magic wand method of like, if you could have anything, if you could be anything, who would you be? What would that look like? How would that feel?
How do you do that shadow work and help them shed their layers?
Great question. So there is a whole list of shadows for each one of the blueprints. And I have a checklist that I give all of my clients and I have them check off, you know, their shadows. And I just recently had an experience with a client and she was like, she kind of freaked out. She was like, oh my God, I have all these shadows. And I was like, you're not alone. I have just as many shadows as you do, you know, and I work on them, you know, and I work through them. So the number one thing is identifying them.
Yeah.
Right. And then giving them a voice. Okay. The shadow is here for a reason. What's its reason? Loving it. You know, it's like doing parts work with it. Right? Yeah. It's like doing inner child work with it. I'm also trained in a healing modality called accelerated evolution.
Okay.
And we have processes that we use to talk to these parts, to talk to your body, see where it's a very embodied practice and process where we, you know, locate in your body, like, where is this message coming from? Where does this shadow live? What does this shadow, you know, want to say? And then we work through like a meditation process, a guided process, and uncover its wisdom.
What are examples of some shadows?
So an energetic shadow is like the hierarchy of like I don't even need to be touched in order to have an orgasm. And you, sexual blueprint, you're all about the orgasm. Like, I'm better than you because I'm so powerful.
Okay. Yeah.
So like that's one. Sensual shadow that I had a lot of is not being able, is getting stuck in your head so that you're not in your body.
Yes. Okay.
And so, that is, I think that's a common occurrence for a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
That we can't stop thinking about the to-do list, what happened at work, what's going on with the kids, the worries and all of that. Like we're not able to, we kind of let our brains run away, with our thoughts, instead of being really mindful and going, you know what, I'm going to have sexy time right now. Like, this is not the time to think about the to-do list. This is the time to like set that aside and to focus,
Yeah. Be fully present.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do when there is a partner that maybe isn't as into the process of the blueprints? If a couple comes to see you and one of the partners has kind of one foot out the door,
you do not need to have your partner participate. Like I have a couple where the wife shows up for sessions with me and the husband reaps the benefits.
Okay.
And he knows that she's working with me and he's so excited.
I bet.
So both partners don't need to be on board and like to do the thing. It only takes one. It only takes one person to make a change. And what I find is that once the changes start happening, once you discover your blueprints and you start feeding your blueprints and you start expanding and you start discovering and you start healing, like your partner automatically through energy, through osmosis, through just being in the same room with you, they notice these subtle changes. They notice these differences, or they notice the big changes that are happening. Like their energy starts to go, oh, they start attuning a little bit differently, to yours.
Yeah.
They can. And some partners can also be like, I've heard of people breaking up and splitting up and being like, okay, you're on your path and I'm on my path. And that's okay too. Like they're, conscious uncoupling is a thing. And I know many coaches that guide people through that. So, I say like your partner doesn't have to be on board. I always want, the significant other to know that they're working with me so that it's not a secret, because I don't want to keep, secrets. I mean, yes, keeping some secrets is kind of taboo, but we'll find the different secrets to keep,
Yeah. So you were talking a bit about, I guess, I'll explain it. It's sexual intimacy and how it kind of blends with emotional intimacy. But I'm curious your take on like polyamorous relationships. And I think it's probably pretty easy to build the sexual intimacy, but how do you see the emotional side? I guess, how do polyamorous relationships in your work, can they work? Have you seen them work? How do they work, or how do they not work? What are the biggest pitfalls?
I've seen all kinds of different iterations in it and experienced different iterations. I find that like polyamory takes a very mature set of partners with skills, with communication skills. That, the sex part, like we kind of know how to do, right? But the communication, talking about desires, the establishing boundaries, communicating boundaries, honoring each other's boundaries, what to do for aftercare. It definitely takes a level of maturity and practice.
Yeah.
So.
How do you mentioned porn and how sexual blueprints, how it's kind of frames their mindset of just going right in. How else do you feel like porn has impacted society from a sexual standpoint and like expectations?
Yeah, I think it's that expectation of like, this is what it's supposed to look like, both from a physical perspective of like body size, shape, clothing, you know, and the physical act, the positions, the size, the, you know, the look, like all of that. And there's a lot of different body shapes and body sizes. There's a lot of different ways to have pleasure. Like penetration is just one way. You know, it's a really fun way for a lot of people. But there are so many other ways to enjoy sex, especially like in the sensual blueprint. You know, one of the sensual superpowers is that they can be in pleasure all day long and don't need to have an orgasm. Like,
say more on that. What do you mean by that?
Orgasm is not the end goal. So the sexual blueprint, one of the shadows is that it's all about the orgasm. That if like both people don't orgasm, fail, you know, or the successful sex didn't end in orgasm.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the shadows, realizing that, you know, sex is actually a journey and it's meant to be fun and pleasurable. And yes, if there's an orgasm, that's wonderful, but that doesn't need to be the primary focus or like the point of the whole thing. You know, the point being like you want to come and, you know, you want to come, but you want to come and you want to communicate, you know, and play in all kinds of different ways and enjoy and really be in the pleasure and allow your body to like take it all in and to experience it on all these different levels. I mean, there's like, I don't know, don't quote me on this, but like 50 different ways to orgasm, right? And we tend to think of like, you know, 2, right? Or 3. And so, you know, through the erotic blueprints, like opening it up to like, yeah, you know, when you eat something that tastes so good, you're having an orgasm in your mouth from that piece of food, right? But we don't think of it that way because, you know, porn's like, oh yeah, this is the way that you're supposed to have an orgasm. And it's like, no, actually there are so many different ways. It's just a very like narrow-minded view.
Yeah. I'm curious. And I'm not against porn at all. Like there's a huge need for it and I celebrate it. And I celebrate, you know, the people who are really into what they're doing and they do it because they love it and they really like it. So, you know, I just want to say that. Yeah. But the effects of it could be, you said narrow-mindedness.
Yeah.
I could see that. I'm curious. There was a time when we were in in a group of a bunch of therapists and healers. And I remember you introduced yourself and you said, and I'm a sexually satisfied woman. And you like owned that.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious, in being sexually satisfied where you are now versus before when you were dissatisfied, how has that changed other aspects of your life and your relationship?
Oh my gosh, it has completely changed so many aspects in my life and my relationship. So I'm a much calmer person. I'm much more grounded. I don't worry or project as much. I enjoy the moment. I'm more present. I'm more mindful. I'm less judgmental. I've completely changed careers. I didn't always do this. I was in a very masculine professional corporate world most of my life. So I've done like a 180, you know, I feel like. I've become more feminine. I'm a better communicator. In my relationship, like I no longer have one foot out the door. I'm able to communicate what my wants, needs, and desires are, and then take steps, you know, to help me reach, you know, the goals that I have in our relationship.
So being more fulfilled sexually sounds like it also gave you a sense of like ownership over your life and empowerment in the sense of like stepping into your power and stepping into your communication.
Oh, yeah.
And it just allowed you to own your sense of self more. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
I discovered who I was because I felt like I was kind of running around like, I don't know who I am. And, I've always been like a spiritual seeker, but I've always been sort of like looking outside, for things to complete me, fulfill me, satisfy me. And so, through the erotic blueprints and feeling sexually satisfied and feeding myself and having my partner feed me, I'm just, it's remarkable. I feel like a new person. I feel like I've been returned home to me. And so my level of confidence is huge. That judgmental voice, telling me, oh, you're not good enough, or da, 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 da. That is so much quieter now than it was before.
What do you think attributes to that from the sexual standpoint? Is it being more desired gives you more confidence, or is it
being able to advocate for myself and speak up for myself and speak my needs and have somebody meet me and receive me and actually feel like seen, felt, heard, all of it. Can I give an example?
Please.
So this was one of the biggest turning points for my partner and I. So like I said, when he took the quiz, his energetic blueprint was the lowest, right? And it was the highest for me. And so when we first started doing this work, we would go to events and we would practice and we did the program and we were doing private sessions with Jaya. And every time we went to do like an energetic practice, he would like roll his eyes and be like, this is just mumbo jumbo woo woo crap. And, this is only for people who are really into crystals. And, he had that, shadow perspective, like poo-pooing on me for, being highly energetic. And that really hurt my feelings. And so, of course, I'm going to be offended and frustrated and upset, And so we were at this turning point where I was feeling really frustrated and upset. And I said, look, could you please just hover your hands over my heart? Could you just do that for me, please? And he was like, okay. And I was laying down on the bed and he was standing over me, or he was sitting I think he was sitting next to me and on the bed, and we were fully clothed, and he just hovered his hands over my heart. And as I breathed and as I felt him like drop into presence and be present with me and not be distracted and, and just settle in, I could feel his energy settle. I could feel my energy settle. Like a deep breath came into my body, and then I started crying. Tears just started streaming down my face because for the first time I really felt like he was meeting me where I needed to be met. He was seeing me. And he said that in that experience, that because he could see the visceral reaction in my body, that deep breath and that deep relaxation, and then the tears come, he was like, there's something to this energetic thing. Oh my gosh. And so it opened his eyes and that expanded him. And from then on, he has been like, okay,
He's been a believer.
Let's do this. So he became a believer.
What do you say to people that if their partner isn't willing to engage in the blueprints, and how do you empower the partner that is, if, say, the partner that isn't, they might be reaping the rewards, but they just don't really care to engage, even still? What I'm hearing you say is that a large part of it is feeling as though you're advocating for yourself, and then you're getting your needs met also. What if even through this, a partner isn't getting their needs met? How do they still feel as though they're worthy, or that they're not asking for too much, or they're not the problem?
So you start with feeding yourself. If your partner is not willing, you take care of yourself, because the erotic blueprints are also all about self-care. That was another thing that I hadn't listed, was was one of the, I would ignore myself. My whole life I ignored myself, ignored my body, just went with my brain, was stuck up in my head. And so I was always looking for other people to feed me, you know? And with the erotic blueprints, I learned how to feed myself in each one of the blueprints so that I am satiated. So it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they believe. It doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter what they're doing or not doing. I mean, it does if it's crossing your boundaries, if you don't consent to it. Yeah, of course. But if your partner's like, whatever, but you still really love them. I mean, partner, it would be really great if it only takes a mustard seed of willingness, right? I've heard this in so many different circles, like like a grain of sand of willingness. But taking it back to the self-care, you feed yourself. That's how you deal with that situation.
Okay. And you mentioned superpowers. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So some of the superpowers, like some of the superpowers of the energetic are that like they don't need to be touched in order to have an orgasm. Like hovering hands over bodies. Oh man, I have definitely been able to develop my energetic self so that I can have orgasms without even being touched. My body moves and, you know, like kriyas and, you know, when like people kind of go, oh my gosh, like I'm jerking in all these different weird ways. Like what's happening with my body? You're just having energetic orgasms.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And so don't need to be touched. Anticipation starts, you know, way before any physical touch. Energetics can go into like altered states of consciousness and like see colors and, you know, have like transformational experiences. Some of the other energetic superpowers. What are some of my other favorite ones? Well, there's dark energetic and there's light energetic, and that's like a whole advanced level. But there are superpowers in each one of those as well. And so, like, a dark energetic superpower is like the ability to turn somebody on with like just a look, like a smoldering look, and build that anticipation. That's amazing. Some of the sensual superpowers are that like you can be in pleasure all day long and don't even need to have an orgasm.
Yeah, you mentioned that one.
That you can have orgasms from tasting food, from seeing a beautiful painting. I mean, people who are like, you can have a sensual orgasm through listening to a song, you know, and having that response in your body. Some of the kinky superpowers are that they're incredibly creative. Like, I mean, in the taboo realm, like if you can think of it, if you can dream it, like it's possible and it can happen. Both on a psychological side, like stories are endless, you know?
Yeah.
And on a physical sensation-based side, it's like all the different toys and objects and different kinds of sensations. Like it doesn't even have to be impact, you know, or it can be soft impact. Like it's just incredible, you know, all the variety and everything that's available, you know, to you. Sexual superpower, they can have orgasms, like no problem, all the time.
Yeah,
it is not an issue. They don't have to think about it. They never worry about it at all. It just happens. Like it's one of the things I love about the sexual blueprint is that they're easy. You know what they want. You know what they need. You know how to feed them.
How do we? I'm sorry. There's
and then
one
the
more
shapeshifter, and then the shapeshifter superpower. I mean, they have all the superpowers. Yeah, like every superpower. And I only gave you like 1, 2, maybe 3 of each, and there's like 7 to like 10 for each. And that's what you can find out in the Erotic Blueprint report when you take the Erotic Blueprint quiz. It gives you all that information. So yeah, the shapeshifter has all of the superpowers.
I'm curious from a societal standpoint. So we've talked a bit about boundaries. something that I've noticed in clients that I've worked with is with young men is there's this fear now of crossing boundaries because they want to respect their partner. So what that has led to for some people is a lack of assertiveness. So how, from a societal standpoint, do we still maintain assertiveness? Because assertiveness could be a turn on for a lot of people. So how do people step into their power and remain assertive while still respecting boundaries? Because I'm just going to ask about a specific example in the sense it's not that specific, but if a person is like asking if they can kiss you, doesn't that kind of take away the allure of like the lead up?
It can, yes, because I totally understand what you're talking about. And yeah, it is a very like delicate, sensitive, yeah, it has become a big issue because of exactly what you're talking about. And there are ways to like ask in a really nice way, like right before the moment's going to happen. Like, I would really love to kiss you. You can make it into a very sensual thing, or you can like energetically tease, like not kiss, come close, and not, energetic kissing is a thing where you don't actually kiss. And so there are ways that you can do it without speaking. I find that speaking about a lot of these things is really sexy. It's really hot. Like from a psychological perspective, like I like to talk about sex. I want to talk about sex. Like it makes me juicy, having consent conversations can be really hot. And so having a consent conversation before, anything happens sexually, like I have a sex communication checklist, right?
Okay.
That has all of the different ways to have sex in each one of the blueprints. So there are categories for energetic. Here's how to have energetic sex. Categories for sensual. Categories for kink. And then there's another way expanded checklist for kink because it's so vast. And sexual and shapeshifter. And so by having the sex communication checklist and going through it yourself, like you can make it into a fun date night thing of like, here, I printed this off for you. Like, I want to see how you score, or like, what are the things that you're into? And on the sex communication checklist, there's a column that's want to, willing to, and don't want to. So you know what your yeses, your maybes, and your nos are. And so you can literally fill that out and like hand it to your partner and you can see where you match up. And so you can do it that's one way you can do it without talking, or talking about it. And to your point of like, well, doesn't that kind of take away from the romance of the situation? Yes. And, it can and it can't, and there are ways to like, also when you learn about the energetic blueprint and the sensual blueprint specifically, learning to read body language and congruency and body chemistry can also like help you avoid those things. Like if you know that you see somebody who's like clammed up, it's not time to kiss, And so learning to speak the languages of each of the blueprints can help guide you so you can go, oh, is she leaning in more, and those little subtleties and doing it in a playful way too.
How do you see people evolve in their sex lives in the sense of how much of it is doing like the old reliable for this particular couple? Like if they know what they like, how much of it is repetition of doing the same thing versus exploring new things? I'm sure it's different for everyone, but I guess in your work, how do you see it for most couples evolve?
So I asked them, okay, so where are you at with things? Okay, great. You have orgasms. Like there's nothing wrong with, the way that you're having sex. You just want to expand. Fantastic. Okay. Well, let's look at each one of the blueprints and what jumps out to you, what excites you, what lights you up, what makes you feel juicy, what gets you hard, and then let's expand into that. Let's explore, how to do those things.
I'm going to ask you for men and women, but how do men explore this without being, if they don't have a partner, how do men explore the education aspect of it without being called a pervert? Like, how do they explore more of themselves and how to pleasure women or men, or how to pleasure others? How do they educate themselves without being deemed a pervert? Or
I find that labels and like judgment can happen and might happen. And it's like, it's sort of, it can be unavoidable because you're really looking at like somebody else's judgment of you and their perspective, And I find that people might call me a pervert because I talk about sex, I find that when you do things mindfully and consensually, to me, it's not perverted. Then there is a whole turn on of perversion.
Yeah.
So, there's a whole kink space for that. Like I was just at DomCom. It's a convention, where dominants and submissives come together and they play in a kinky space. And so if like you want to do that, there are lots of people for you to talk to and to explore with. There are groups, societies, clubs, dungeons, there's a culture where you can,
but it's about finding your tribe.
Yeah. It is about finding your tribe. And and I go back to the mindful and conscious and respectful, aspect of it. And I find that communication, is key. And being sensitive to other people as well, because in certain circles, I don't use the word sex. I use intimacy, right? Because I'm trying to be respectful of like people's religious belief. If I'm in front of a religious crowd, I don't swear, I use the word intimacy, things like that. So sort of having a higher level of like self-awareness, and respect for others. I feel like you can't go wrong if you're respectful. And if you do cross a boundary or you do get labeled, something, or somebody gets upset with you, like there is repair that you can do. There are, you can learn how to say, oh, I'm so sorry. There's a protocol. There's a practice when a consent has been crossed, there is a protocol to clean it up. And to prevent it from happening again.
If you were to summarize, what is the key to a healthy sex life?
To summarize, I would say the key to having a healthy sex life is understanding yourself. Number 1. 2 is being able to feed yourself so that you're satiated, so that you're not looking for anybody else to complete you. You are whole and complete just the way you are. The third would be healing.
What do you mean by that specifically?
Healing. We all have things that we judge ourselves for, or that we're ashamed of, or we've had traumatic situations which keep us in fear, which keeps us away from intimacy because we're scared. We don't want to be hurt. Healing, like finding the right practitioners for your healing journey, so that you're not living from that old operating system. Yes, things happen and that's messed up and not okay. And I believe in like, you can either walk forwards or you can walk backwards. And like, I found that a lot of my life I was walking backwards, and I was always going back to, the way things were, what happened, right? And now I'm walking forwards and going, okay, what What more do I need to heal from? Stuff comes up all the time. Where do I need to expand? Where do I need to soften? So continuing to be on that journey of self-discovery.
Laurie Love, where can people find you? Because this work, I've told you many times before, the work you do is so important because I don't think enough people are talking about this. I think people are afraid to talk about this. I think there's a lot of barriers to us as a society talking about this more. And we need to break some of these walls down so that people can heal and live happier, more fulfilling lives. And sex is a big part of life. So where can people find you? Where could they learn more about you, about your work, about all things Laurie Love?
They can go to my website, which is www.laurielove.org. And I spell my name LaurieLove.
Again, perfect name for your line of work.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It has truly been a pleasure. I have learned a lot from talking to you, not just today, but in a lot of our prior conversations. You are amazing at what you do, and I appreciate our friendship, and the amount that I have learned from you has just been astounding. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for answering my questions, and just thank you for being you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Laurie.